Yeah. Take whatever.
Hi everyone. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Welcome to the Ann Arbor District Library. My name is Dennison, and I'm a clerk here. I also help out with programs, and we're really excited to be partnering with the Ann Arbor Office of Sustainability and Innovations tonight to host the 820 Sustainability Forum. Before we get started, I just want to mention a few things. First thing is, if you have a cell phone with you, if you can just please make sure that it is turned off or silent. Next, if you need any hearing assistance devices, we do have some in the hallway. And if you need to use the restroom, we have some located out in the atrium. And if you enjoy coming to programs like these, please make sure to check out our events brochures. We have some in the hallway as well, and they're listed online. So you can find more fun stuff like this panel tonight. And introducing the panelist tonight is going to be Jordan Larson. So please help me welcome him now.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here, especially those that are in person and those that are joining us remotely. These are hybrid events. We have them live streamed by the library and also record them, so folks can watch them on the Ann Arbor CTN YouTube channel as well afterward. But we especially do appreciate the folks that can join us here in person, so thank you for being here. Again, my name is Jordan Larson, and I am a Community Engagement Coordinator with Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations. And we're really excited to have you all join us this evening for what is the third session in our 2024 Sustainability Series in partnership with the library. And this particular session is titled Wired for Sustainability, Exploring Circular Lifestyles or Circular Life Cycles in Electronics. So really quickly, I can just walk us through what we'll be covering today. We'll start with just this overview of the agenda and do some introductions. Then we will have a moderated panel discussion that we've prepared for you. We have a couple great panelists that are joining us in person, as well as a couple virtual panelists. And then we will have some time for audience Q&A as well. And then a quick update regarding circularity and what our office is up to in those regards, which Will be able to provide us. And then we will have a closeout at the end. So again, thank you for joining us. And I will get us kind of oriented to where we are in our current series. Last month, we had the opportunity to hear from a couple staff members talking about the Home Energy Rating Disclosure Ordinance, and that was a lot of fun. And right now, we're on our third session, and up next month in April, we'll have our Equity in Action through 820, which will be happening on April 24th. So we would encourage you to come out to that event if you are available and free. And now to get our session kicked off for today, I'm going to actually start by introducing another colleague of mine and a staff member of the Office of Sustainability and Innovations, Will Garcia, who is a sustainability coordinator with our office, focusing their work on circular economy. And Will is excited to serve the Ann Arbor community as a member of the OSI team, focusing on circular economy programs and initiatives. He has a BS degree in community development from Central Michigan University and a professional background in public sector hazard materials management. And outside of work, he can be found spending time with his family, including 3 adorable cats, watching copious amounts of basketball and honing his craft as a home cook. And Will has graciously assembled our questions and plan for our speakers today. So he will actually be introducing our panel. I'd like to bring up Will.
Awesome. Thank you all so much again for coming out. This is definitely something that I'm very excited about. I'm glad to be sharing this with you all tonight. We're going to start over on Zoom with Dr. Oladele Ogunseitan, who holds the titles of Distinguished Professor and University of California Presidential Chair at UC Irvine, where he led the establishment of the program in public health and served as the founding chair of the Department of Population Health and Disease Prevention. Odele's research focuses on the environmental and human health impacts of industrial development with respect to pollution, prevention, and remediation. His laboratory investigates interdisciplinary approaches to the discovery of less toxic chemicals and materials through life cycle assessment of potential impacts on human health and planetary health. I also mentioned that research a lot in my job interview with the office, so thanks for the job, Dele. All right, so then I will then pass it over still on our Zoom to Tori Lowe, who is the Manager of Business Development at Human IT. With over a decade of experience in direct sales and a passion for leveraging technology for social impact, Tori Lowe has excelled as the Manager of Business Development at Human IT for over 3 years. Tori's leadership is defined by a commitment to diminishing the digital divide, say that 5 times fast, through strategic relationship building, operational oversight, and a focus on sustainable growth. Guiding a national team and driving cross-functional collaboration, Tori's expertise not only fosters high-performing talent, but also plays a crucial role in empowering communities and promoting equitable access to technology. Then over to my left, I almost said right, that'd be embarrassing. We have Nate Yost, who is a trustee with All Hands Active. Nate is a lifelong Washtenaw County resident with much of that time in Ann Arbor. Currently, Nate serves as a trustee of the all-volunteer, nonprofit, downtown makerspace or hackerspace, All Hands Active, and has been in operations and leadership roles there since pretty near its beginning, in 2009. Over the last few years, Nate's had the great privilege to work alongside an outstanding group of talented All Hands Active members by hosting a weekly event called Repairs Day Thursdays, which first debuted around 2019. These events serve as a repair clinic for the broken things that people bring in. Just about anything imaginable. Kitchen gadgets, scooters, clocks, electric lawnmowers, lamps, shoes, some electronics, and even snow globes. And then finally, last but certainly not least, we have Steve Noble. And Steve is the electronics recycling specialist for the State of Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. In this role, he oversees the state's electronic waste take-back program, which recycles more than 20 million pounds of electronic waste per year on average. This assures that consumers in the state have convenient access to proper reuse and recycling of unwanted electronics. And this also includes assuring that manufacturers are complying with Michigan's extended producer responsibility law and that recyclers of electronics are meeting essential environmental and data security standards. Can we just get like a round for our panelists? Thank you. So this is going to be kind of an open question, and we'll get everyone's take on this, but can you provide our audience with a brief overview of how you got involved in electronics waste and what you or your organization does to promote the circular management of electronics? We can go in order. Yeah, Dali, do you want to get started?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Will. And really, it's a big honor for me to share this panel with the other panelists. And I was interested for my PhD at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, to understand how we can clean up polluted environments. And the lab that I was working with at the time had a contract with the Oak Ridge National Labs, which we all know had a legacy of pollution from the war efforts. There are toxic metals, radioactive materials, and all kinds of organics. And I remember at the time we had a strain of bacterium that was able to degrade polychlorinated biphenyl compounds, which was used in transformers for a while. And I started working on ways to genetically engineer organisms to do different kinds of degradative work. And that led me to working on mercury, and that work was visible to the Electric Power Research Institute in California, in Palo Alto. And they wanted to find a way to remove mercury from coal. As we know, coal is one of the biggest sources of mercury pollution. That led to me coming to California, and I've been at UC Irvine since. I added lead to my research program, and we developed a biosensor for lead. All the while, I was at the end of pollution, trying to clean up pollution. And I thought this was going to be an endless, I'll have a job as a researcher, but I didn't really see it as a way to solve problems. And so when I was contacted by some engineers and material scientists saying, oh, legislation and regulation is coming to get rid of tin lead solder from electronic products, and we don't know what to replace lead with. I jumped at the chance to be at the front end of the pipeline for pollution. Can we actually eliminate toxic chemicals and replace them with safer alternatives? Now it's more than 20 something years ago that we started that project, and we've gone on to look at not just the way to get rid of toxic chemicals, but also to think about other policy, economics, educational ways to reduce the burden of e-waste. That's taking us across the country and also internationally. So that's how I got started. I credit a lot of my colleagues in engineering, material science, and the social sciences to supplement my knowledge in toxicology and public health. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. Tori, what about you?
Yeah, great to meet you all. So I'll be very transparent. I started in my career with electronics kind of on the wrong side and was responsible for selling technology. And through that kind of experience, I did it for about 7-ish years. And through that experience, I found a lot of the customers that I was working with were bringing back tech equipment that was completely working well, nothing wrong with it, but then we were just throwing it into a recycling bin and kind of letting it go on its way. And through that experience, it kind of really dawned on me of how much tech was going to waste and that things weren't being properly disposed of. And so I kind of set out on a mission to find the next company that I could work for that would give us the opportunity to do good in the same space of the technology space. And that's kind of where I stumbled across Human IT. And so Human IT has been around for now about 12 years. I've been with the organization for about 3, and we're really kind of living the value of circular economy by working with organizations across the country to take in the tech that they no longer need. But instead of looking to recycle them, we actually are doing full refurbishments in-house, and we're actually getting them back out into the communities. It's really alarming to know that there's millions of individuals in the United States who don't have access to a computer or high-speed internet. And yet there's so much tech that's being produced and consequently also thrown away that could easily go back into the communities and give folks that access. And so that really kind of drove that mission forward. We're the #1 digital equity nonprofit in the country, which is great. We've really done a lot of work to getting communities connected to the digital world. And we're just a firm believer that access to technology is not a privilege. It is a right that we have as modern citizens in 2024, and every person should have access to that. And our work with our partners is really to make sure that that divide continues to shrink. Ultimately, the goal is to eliminate it altogether and that everyone would have access to this in a very affordable manner. So really excited to meet you all and continue the discussion.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Nate, what about you?
So I'm Nathan Yost, been involved with All Hands Active, which is one of our local maker spaces here in town. We've been going for quite a while, around the start of, I believe, the start of the makerspace movement in the United States. Or pretty close to that. So we've had a lot of experience sort of improvising in a rough sense, but what we are doing is essentially democratizing technology or access to technology and making it as low of a barrier to entry as possible. We think that everybody should be able to understand how their devices work. We don't like secrets, for lack of a better word. So we appreciate the ability to take things apart, to understand how they work, to put them back together, to make them better, to truly own them. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of what Repairs Day is about. It's about basically getting people involved with how their devices work and showing them that they're not black boxes and showing them that they're allowed to tinker and they shouldn't feel, fearful of doing so. And so we provide a space to do that. We have the tools to do that. Some guidance a little bit. We're not we usually don't just say here's some tools, go at it. But if they want to do that, that's fine. and we'll encourage them all the way. None of us are experts at what we're doing on any given topic. We just kind of figure it out as we're going, like 90% of the time. But the more we do it, the more we learn about things, so we can spread that knowledge to other people and hopefully give them some incentive to like understand more about what they're using. And so that's, you know, an important aspect of what we do, I think, and it just so happens that also plays into the circular economy, because you can get more out of your devices if you understand how to fix them, of course, and like, you know, have a mentality of like, I want to fix this thing instead of just throwing it away. So that's what we do in a nutshell. You know, we're also just a place where you can use tools and hang out and talk about making cool stuff. So that's always fun. And we have a lot of cross-pollination from that, so.
Excellent, excellent. That's awesome. Steve, what about you?
Well, I got started in the electronics recycling world. I was working as the environmental manager for a company over in Jackson, Michigan. And of course, you know, the environmental guys, you should know where stuff goes and how to recycle stuff. And this was back in, I'm going to guess, the early 90s. And a couple people in the building brought me their old computers and their old CRT monitors, and they said, we don't want these anymore. Where do we recycle them? Well, Jackson was the bastion of the big landfill or the big incinerator, so stuff like electronics couldn't go in the trash over there because they didn't want to burn it in the incinerator. So I did some research and I found a place in Detroit. And so I filled up my truck with everybody's stuff and ventured over and found and knocked on the door, and to my surprise, here was a warehouse full of televisions and computer monitors and other stuff that probably to this day, they're probably still there, if truth be known. It didn't look like they were recycling them. They were taking the computers and anything that had value to them, and they were recycling those. And anything that had glass and didn't have a lot of recycling value was getting stuck in the back of the warehouse. So I took it upon myself to figure out how to, you know, actually get stuff recycled. I was on the board of directors for a small nonprofit, excuse me, in Jackson. And I decided at the time, you know, we ought to offer the service to our community. So I wrote a grant and got a community foundation grant. And within a year, we were taking electronics at Recycling Jackson, and we've been taking them ever since. And I learned a lot about it, found out, you know, working through Consumers Energy that they knew where there was a couple valid recyclers that were actually recycling everything that came in. So we started working with them, and the rest is kind of history. I think we're about 25 years later, and we recycle somewhere around 75,000 pounds a year out of the Jackson community. Most of that does go to reuse. We're working with a company in Kalamazoo, but as we all know, there's a lot of stuff right now that can't be reused. So, but we make sure that it's properly disposed of.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. So this first couple of questions are going to be aimed at Dele. You and your team had an article published in 2023 in Circular Economy, and I thought that some of the top line results were just astounding. Forgive me if I'm misinterpreting, and please correct me if I am, but if I read it correctly, nearly 30 million people near e-waste recycling and dismantling centers across 15 countries were estimated to be at risk of exposure to toxic metals in the air, water, and soil, including nearly 6 million children. So can you explain the processes for how electronics disposed of in Michigan can become pollutants in communities with electronics recycling centers all around the world? And how do we manage electronics waste in a way that protects global public health?
Thank you. As you noted, my interest originally and still is in protecting the environment and human health from all the toxic chemicals and materials that are in electronic products, particularly after they become waste. We cannot avoid the use of materials that are just dangerous, and we have rules that prevent us facing hazardous exposures when we're using products. It's when we open them up and try to recover small amounts of gold or copper or silver that we become exposed to those kinds of notorious toxicants. And the landscape, the international landscape has changed in terms of importing and exporting what we call waste, particularly hazardous waste. And we have United Nations guidelines and regulations, particularly the Basel Convention on the Transboundary Movement of Hazardous Waste and their disposal, to help countries avoid importing waste that is dangerous for the population, or to provide guidelines for countries that may want to export such waste because they don't have the facilities, the landfills, or the kinds of services that we just talked about in Michigan to collect and recycle waste. So unfortunately, there are so many loopholes and gaps in the policies. Even in the United States, there are certainly states that have been quick to understand that you just don't want people from dumping their electronics into the domestic garbage waste. It does still happen. But there are so many other states where the regulations are unknown. People don't really understand the rules. We did a study of households in all the 50 states of the country. And at the time, every household had about 2 to 4 small or medium-sized electronic products that they are stockpiling. They didn't know what to do with them. And unfortunately, some of these do end up in shipping containers that are bound for other countries. And the labor there is cheap. And unfortunately, people are not aware of the risks and the hazards, and they're not protected by personal protective equipment that I'm sure people recycling e-waste in Michigan would have access to. So we have a lot of gaps in both policy and technology, actually, to keep our e-waste in the United States, and I bet in Michigan. I'm sure you are trying hard, but there are just still gaps in how much people may not understand what to do, and when they move, things get into their trash, and ultimately there is transboundary movement. The World Health Organization tracks this, and every other year or so, they provide information on how much waste is moving from one state to another, one country to another. Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition, Basel Action Network, a lot of non-governmental organizations that have tracked the electronic waste from one country to another. We have to tighten the regulations, but more importantly, we have to educate people and invest, as Michigan is doing, in infrastructure to collect and to recycle. We just published an article about humanitarian aid. Some of the e-waste is kind of donated because they're reusable, they're refurbishable, but they don't last long in the countries of destination. And so and then they become real waste in those countries. And that's another source. So I think monitoring and providing opportunities for people to know where to take their waste is important. One of the things we studied was how willing are people to take their e-waste to a collection facility. People are willing to travel about 4 miles. Beyond that, it becomes a burden. They're also willing to pay about 10% premium cost. We already do this for some electronics, pay it ahead of time so that it's used to incentivize collection and proper treatment. Michigan may have a combination of these incentives, both from the manufacturer side and the retailer, but also for the consumer. to be able to have a coherent policy where no electronic waste leaves the state. But right now, we just don't have the kind of data collection that I'm willing to bet not 100% of Michigan's e-waste stays in the state. And that's just not to say anything bad about Michigan. You're probably doing better than most other states. But those are the ways that the waste leaves the state and ultimately may travel around the world, where the WHO has shown that children and women are particularly vulnerable because they do this kind of hazardous labor without the protection that's needed.
Got it. Thank you. And by the way, these questions, if there are any other panelists who would like to comment, feel free to. Another top line result that was really motivated me to kind of reevaluate some processes internally in our organization was that extending the usable life of electronics, the research, if I read it correctly, showed by 50 to 100% was estimated to result in 1,337 to 2,026 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas emissions avoided by 2030. Those are numbers that are so big that I really don't know how to like conceptualize them, but it sounds, they're big. So what sort of strategies and tactics do you think are required to potentially achieve some of those results?
Yeah, thank you. The numbers are staggering. I just actually saw a report from Germany, and they were trying to quantify the greenhouse gas emissions of their telecommunications industry. But there is something we call embodied carbon, which is the emissions associated with actually making the product. So you can imagine a mobile phone with the mining of all of the minerals and metals from country X. It's shipped to country Y, where it's refined and the manufacturing takes place, and then it's shipped back to, let's say, California, where we use the phone, and then ultimately we figure out a way to dispose of it. So the embodied carbon is what is emitted during the manufacturing of the product. There is a separate emission associated with the energy used when I plug in my phone or my computer. I'm using energy, and if it's not solar or renewable, it's carbon. So what we calculated was that if you were to be buying a mobile phone every 2 years, actually that in a way that we're all incentivized because the software changes and it gets obsolescence is sort of what we buy, that the hardware itself may still work, but your phone, the screen, the camera, everything that they're trying to sell us really gets outdated quickly. So people are exchanging their old phones or computers with new ones too frequently. And in making new phones to sell to us, we're emitting carbon. So the amount of carbon that's embodied in each new product is what we calculated in that article. And we estimated that if you were to make it possible for people to use their electronic devices 1 or 2 more years, you'll reduce that emission. It doesn't mean that the manufacturers will make less money. They can figure out other ways to make money. And we just have to impress upon them that this is an important problem. The electronics industry is one of the top 8 leading emitters of carbon globally, not just because of the supply chain, but also because of this kinds of embodied carbon and rapid replacement of their products. So they have a lot of room to cut emissions, and the consumers also have a role to play. The ways that we recommended repair, reuse, recycle, right? So if we're recycling all of the precious materials in phones, we don't have to go back to the earth and mining more new stuff to make new phones, right? The Department of Energy actually just released an invitation for comment on how to get what they call critical metals from electronic waste, because they see it as wasteful, right? That we're throwing out the precious materials that make us less secure because we're dependent on other countries to sell this to us. If we can just recover them here, we would not be so dependent on foreign countries and all the international politics that's around that issue. So we also need to invest in the legislature's initiative on third-party repair, right? So quite frankly, I should say I'm the co-chair of Apple's Green Chemistry Advisory Board, although I don't speak for them, I don't represent them, but I do read when they are thinking something will hurt their bottom line, right? And it's not just Apple, it's all of the big manufacturers, that if you let others repair your products, you're losing money. But I think they've come around to see that it's not necessarily so. So we're getting incremental advances in having third-party repair, which allows us to use our phones and computers longer. The other thing that we can do to make sure, of course, consumers can just not be, we all want the latest and the best. I mean, that's just the way we're conditioned to be. And I don't think we'll make any headway in convincing people to not have the latest or the best, but we can figure out a way to be innovative in designing for the environment while we also allow older equipment to take new software that's advanced so that you don't have to throw the whole thing away just to get the latest software. So that's quite important. And retailers have to be honest about what they do. People are concerned about their data because increasingly we all live on our digital devices, so your bank information. So we have to be able to convince people that they're not going to be vulnerable when we encourage them to go repair or recycle their products. So those are just some of the things that I'm sure maybe some of them are already being implemented in Michigan and some other states, but we need it to be a national program so we don't have gaps in interstate commerce.
For sure. Sure thing. Thank you so much. I'm going to move over to Tori, if that's all right. Human IT specializes in IT asset disposition. That's the field dedicated to managing the waste that is generated when businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, or other organizations need to dispose of their electronics. And historically, in that field, recycling has been seen as the gold standard, but Human IT has used IT asset disposition to reuse over 300,000 devices through programs that get computers and other technology into low-income communities, which increases equitable access. How did Human IT come to incorporate reuse into IT asset disposition? And what do you think the role of IT asset disposition is in promoting both environmental and social sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so Human IT, we were really founded in the idea of reuse. Our founders came and actually met at a Best Buy where they worked, and a kind of similar story to me, and realized that there was really an issue at hand. And so when it comes to, the ITAD industry or the IT asset disposition industry, it's a very profit-driven, for-profit company-driven industry, right? And there's a lot of folks who will move directly to recycling, which is wonderful. Recycling is a great step, right? It's not a wrong step by any means, right? But when it comes to recycling, there's still the usability of that technology, right? The technology is not obsolete yet. And so where the business needs and where we really identified is that potentially maybe the business needs of the organizations that we support, those devices aren't working for their business needs anymore, but it doesn't mean that those devices can't be used by somebody who's getting maybe their first computer for the first time or what have you. And so we really look at that circular economy. And so when a device comes into our facility through whether many of different channels through, for-profit organizations that just simply have tech that they need to get rid of, other nonprofit organizations like city entities and municipalities, for example, City of Detroit, we work very closely with to take in the tech that those companies and organizations are generating. But by refurbishing them and getting them back out into the community, we're ensuring that they're not just worst case scenario ending up in a landfill, but even being recycled. To give you an idea, a ton of devices that we bring in with some other ITED firms would probably be recycled purely based off of cosmetic damage, right? And I think that's really a alarming factor in the sense that a scratch or a cosmetic blemish could be the reason why a device ends up in a landfill, when that reusability is still there. The software is still eligible to be upgraded. All of the factors of it are still there. And so we've really invested in creating a full refurbishment department that is able to, for example, skin devices where we're able to add on layers that will protect the devices from being damaged or anything like that and get them back out into the community. I think, when we talk about CO2 emissions, we also I always think it's important to talk about how much e-waste is the number one trash stream in the world, right? It's the number one. And when you think about where we're going in the way of consumerism and Dele, I think you hit a really great point of like, we are conditioned to purchase this tech, right? I know again, where I speak about my experience, I was the one who was selling you that tech. So I definitely get it from that aspects. And we have the right, I think, when we think about legislation and things that are happening, it's like the right to repair is a huge component in our ability to actually have that visibility to even know how to repair these devices. But also like not having it's a lock and key, it's a very secretive industry of the manufacturers who are creating the devices. But as consumers, we have the right to be able to understand how to use them, as well as to be able to access them for affordable cost. And so with Human IT, what we really value is, one, getting them back out into the community. To give you an idea, if we were to, excuse me, I've got a little tickle in my throat, but if we were to recycle 1 million laptops, right, we could save enough energy and power to fuel over close to 4,000 homes in the United States. And so the way to be able to really help the environment and also the communities that we are a part of is about getting the tech that is being generated, being used by a lot of corporations across the United States, but encouraging them to change their business practices to not just recycle, but actually work with organizations that are reusing, whether it's Human IT or any other organization that's looking to focus on that reuse.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I was wondering if you could potentially expound on that a little bit. I think a lot of the times when we talk about, materials management, it comes from the strictly an environmental lens. And I guess, if I was to get another TV, it'd be TV number 4 in my home. Then I guess that's the similar reuse to if someone who never had one gets one. I guess those would both be reused, but like clearly those are very different situations in terms of social benefit. So can you talk a little bit more on some of the social benefits that you're able to do, and particularly your work in addressing the digital divide?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, right, we wholeheartedly believe that it is a right and a right for everyone to have access to technology. And I think about coming, especially post-COVID, the impact of not having technology and the access to it was, instrumental in the way that we viewed technology, right? We can't access our doctor's appointments. We can't access our doctor or our bank accounts. You really can't do anything without having access to a computer, let alone become a part of the workforce. And so our programmatic efforts really focus on a 4-prong approach. We don't believe in just giving a computer is going to do it, right? You can't give a computer to somebody and not give them the education that comes along with it. And so with every device that we give out, we're also giving a 1-year warranty and tech support on every device, as well as giving digital literacy training. So teaching people how to use the computer and access those benefits, as well as helping and steward to getting access to low-cost internet. We really want to make sure someone's walking away from a device with us feeling, one, supported. Sometimes tech can be daunting, right? It can be really uncomfortable to walk into an Apple store where you see all those folks just staring at you and ready to sell you the $2,000 computer. If you are not readily accessing technology, you probably aren't feeling confident to go in there, right? And so one of the things that we've also launched in the last, I believe it's coming up on its 2 years, in Detroit, we have our first digital equity store, which we joke is the mixture between an Apple store and a YMCA. It's an environment where it's comfortable for you to come in. You're not going to get judged. There's none of that in there. And you're able to get the support. You can get digital literacy training right there in the store. You can get that tech support. You can get the device. And if you don't qualify to get it completely for free, we're able to offer a really discounted rate. So you could walk away with getting a laptop, even if you're not qualified to get it completely for free, at less than $100. There's not a lot of stores that you can walk in and getting those, right? And so, and like I said, like just kind of recap, it's really about making sure that you're leaving us as a digital citizen, that you're feeling confident with the technology, that you feel empowered by it, and that you feel supported by it as well, recognizing that these are reused computers. We want to make sure that you also have that tech support and that warranty. So it's not going to just give you the computer and then it falls apart a month later. We give you that full support for that remainder of that year to make sure that that tech is going to continue to work for you. And hopefully, you know, one of the things I always joke with my team is that the next computer we give out, maybe that's the next president. It's going to change. We hope that we're going to be impacting the generations after us. Because I know when I think about when I went through college and I went into the job market, I can't imagine doing it without a computer. And so we're hoping by the work that we're doing, both in Detroit, Los Angeles, and really across the country, is that we can get as many US citizens access to computers so that they can feel confident walking into the job force or getting access to healthcare. Because it's such a ripple effect when you think of tech. It's not just I can use the computer and scroll social media, right? It's really being able to access the tools and assets that we need to in the modern world. But yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm going to turn it over to Nate. As was mentioned earlier at the top of the show, All Hands Active operates the weekly Repairs Day program, which provides free repair services to the Ann Arbor community, including electronics repair. The group additionally holds events related to retro technology. And a thing that I've noticed is that devices seem to be getting thinner, lighter, harder to open. That's beginning to change. But repair, you know, at least, what role does repair play when we talk about the circular management of electronic devices? And what role can community programs like yours play in improving the usable lifespan of electronic devices by giving people a space to repair things?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just to preface this, we don't get a whole lot of like really, small devices. Typically, they're more, like think of like lamps and like kitchen appliances where, if there's like a screw you can take out and like open it up that you can actually see without a microscope. But at the same time, we're well aware of these, issues with technology, like phones or computers nowadays. Obviously, the components on there are extremely small. And there's a lot of issues with, accessibility when it comes to repairing that sort of thing because it requires somewhat specialized knowledge. It also requires a number of other things. There's as a few of you mentioned already, there's also like a consumerist mindset of like, I have to have the latest and greatest, which of course is not true, but we're kind of all sort of pressured to feel that way, I think, in some ways. So like part of the useful lifespan of a device is like kind of like a mental thing, I think. You can easily get 5 to 7 years out of a cell phone nowadays, and manufacturers are starting to support them longer, which is great because there are real security issues if you use a phone from like 10 years ago and there's like vulnerabilities that haven't been supported by a patch or anything. There's also community movements to like try and extend the life through software or firmware. But if the phone breaks, the screen breaks or something like that, there's a big network of like resources out there to help you fix those things. And, you can go on YouTube, you can go on iFixit, you can bring it to us, we might be able to fix it, or, just go and look at those videos. And, I've replaced some batteries in phones and stuff before, so like maybe I'm helpful, I don't know. But mainly it's having the availability of the extra parts, having those parts being supported by the hardware that you're trying to replace it on. So there's been the right to repair movements. There's been a bit of motion in that in the last, I think 3 to 5 years or so. And so it's important to have that ability to replace the parts because those are the parts that are typically breaking. It's like the screen, the battery, like the USB port. The USB port is a really bad one. So if you can replace those things, you can easily extend the life of your phone or your computer or whatever it is, a number of years. And so like we're happy to show people kind of how to do that. But of course, it requires a bit of a mental hurdle to get over. It's like, I want to try doing this, and it's extremely intimidating to someone who's, not technical at all, for example. And I understand that completely. So just the mere like ability to show up and say like, I want to try and fix this thing is a incredibly vulnerable act, I guess, in a lot of ways. We're not going to judge you, trust me. So it's good that you're showing up, and hopefully we'll show you a little bit about like what goes on there. Even if we can't fix it, you'll understand a little better about why these things happen, and maybe that'll make you a better consumer in the future. I don't know if that covers all the points or not, but
Yeah, no, that definitely did. That definitely did. And then how can people best determine what items can be fixed, upgraded, reused, et cetera, versus when it's time to hang it up and recycle it? And are there any interesting examples you've seen of devices that have been repurposed or upgraded to be able to really extend their usable life?
yeah, I think there are some cases where, well, a personal example is like taking a phone and, reusing it as something else. Like it's still a good computer. You can use it for all sorts of things when it's, reached its useful lifespan. You can use it as a picture frame, or you can use it as like a remote control for your, automated house or something like that. You can do all sorts of, it's a computer. So like it's a very general purpose device. You can use it to read books in bed or something. I don't know. But there's, like a lot more you can do with a phone once it's, reached the end of its like normal lifespan. And so that's like one way to like extend the lifespan of something or reuse it in a creative way. I think basically if you can open the device, it's a lot easier to fix it or approach fixing it. A phone is not really one of those devices, unfortunately. However, like a blender is, you can open it up, you can look inside there, there's a big motor, there's like a few switches on there, there's usually like a fuse or something that's probably blown, which is the reason it's not working. So you can replace these things or fix them, or the motor or whatever, if you can find the parts, which is the tricky thing. A lot of times you can't, and it doesn't really make sense to try to do so because you're spending about as much money on the parts as you would on the device, which is unfortunate. But there's a point at which you kind of have to say, well, can I really justify this repair? And there's also like safety reasons why you might not want to do that too. If your space heater is not working for some reason and there's something wrong with the internal electronics, do you really want to try and fix that thing if you're going to leave it unattended somewhere? The answer is probably no. I would strongly discourage you from doing that. In fact, I will pretty much say like I can't help you with this thing because I don't want to like burn your house down. So there's a number of like interesting things you don't really think about when you try to repair devices that kind of make it harder to do that. But I think in general, we've had such a great success rate overall. It's worth it to try, just to give it a shot. So,
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And I know we're not to go with space heaters. I appreciate that. No, thank you.
Buy a new one.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you though. I'm going to pass it over to Steve. So Michigan has an extended producer responsibility law for electronic waste, which was passed in 2008, if I read it correctly. This law requires manufacturers to provide opportunities to recycle monitors, computers, televisions, tablets, 3D printers, and regular printers used by individuals and businesses with 10 or fewer employees. And that's resulting in tens of millions of pounds of materials being recycled each year. So what are the best ways for consumers and small businesses to get the items that are covered by this program to actually be recycled?
Well, probably the best way is to, and I'm going to use Ann Arbor as an example. There are identified collection locations throughout the state. Most communities have some kind of drop-off location. You can go to, there's a couple websites, greenergadgets.org is one of the good websites where you can find drop-off locations. You can call the state program. You more than likely will end up on my phone, but I can help you find a location. I probably get, I would say 25 to 30 calls a week, mostly from people in very rural Michigan looking for some solution. And I just wrote myself a note. One of the hidden gems of the take-back programs is the majority of the manufacturers, especially the television manufacturers, do offer free mail-back programs, and we should take advantage of that. People don't understand that, like when Washtenaw County or Jackson County or, one of the counties has a collection program, it costs them to put that program on. You've got labor, you've got, the recycling company showing up, you got the cost of disposing of the stuff that's not covered by the program. When you do a collection program, about half of your stuff may be what's called covered devices, so your televisions, your printers, the stuff that the manufacturers are going to pay for. But you get boxes and boxes and boxes of wires and cables and cords and, keyboards and lamps and, all the stuff that he would love to have in his shop to tinker with. And it all comes into an e-waste collection program, because my idea of a e-waste program as a regulator, as a state employee, is very different than the consumer who has a garage full of stuff that they've collected over the last 20 years. Many of it just has a cord, so it must be electronic, right? So it's covered under this program. Well, that's not necessarily true. But back to the mailback program, you can go on, let's say you buy a Samsung TV. You buy it at your local big box store. You're probably going to get a sheet of paper that says, please recycle your television. Well, you got a box, you got all the packaging, you got, everything you need to participate in that mailback program. You can go on Samsung's website. There's a link to take you to a location where you can print a label, seal up that box, and if it's too big, actually, UPS, FedEx, whoever will come to your house and pick it up, and away it goes, and it's properly recycled. The better part of that is, and I see this a lot running my little recycling site over in Jackson, the majority of stuff coming in is just too damn small. I need a screen that's 80 inches wide. This 65 doesn't do it anymore. So they're turning in a TV that's just perfectly fine. It just doesn't meet their mental needs, which is a shame. I mean, but part of it is, think about what a 65-inch TV would have cost you 4 years ago. It was probably up around $2,000. You can go buy one right now for less than $1,000, And so people are taking those old TVs, they still work, and they're just recycling them. They bring them into a collection program, and believe me, by the time they're beat up, after being dropped off at a collection program, they're not reusable. The screens are cracked, the circuit boards are beat up or whatever. So, I don't even remember what the question was. I got on my soapbox.
No, I appreciate that soapbox. And one thing I want to flag particularly in Ann Arbor especially is that we do have a lot of folks who are doing really interesting work in the resettlement and rehousing space. If you were ever in the situation where you needed to, and there are some valid reasons to get rid of a perfectly working 65-inch TV, a lot of those are related to moving. But if you were ever in some sort of a situation where you had to get rid of one, I mean, Jewish Family Services would love that for some of the families that are coming in, refugees. Housed into Home, that's another really great resource. It's something that we actually run into quite a bit. We're looking at mostly on the public works side of the city, but I mean, my hands are in it a little bit with regards to like student move out. When all the students are moving off of campus, what do we do with these materials? So there is a little bit of a reuse network within our community, because you're totally right. Yeah, the 65-inch TVs, that would be perfectly fine in someone's house. It really is a shame seeing those go for recycling. Kind kind of on that note, people in Ann Arbor do have a wide variety of options when deciding, how to recycle or otherwise manage their electronics waste. You've got retail collection programs. We have mail-back programs that are coordinated by the manufacturers, like you were talking about. We have local drop-off options like Recycle Ann Arbor and the county cleanup days. There's private e-waste recyclers that can accept materials. When we're evaluating these recycling programs, or really evaluating an electronics recycler, like what sorts of criteria should members of our community be looking for when they're trying to evaluate all of these admittedly imperfect options?
That's a great question. The state, under the extended producer law that we have, the state does inspect all the facilities that are registered recyclers. We go in and we do a thorough inspection. There's 26 right now that are registered with the state that are part of the program. A bigger and a better way is to ask those companies if they carry a national certification. It was talked about earlier about stuff being sent overseas. If they follow either the R2 Series program or the E-Steward program, they are prevented from sending stuff overseas unless it can be documented that it is actually a viable, piece of equipment that can be reused. So go to either one of those websites, Seri, S-E-R-I. They have a list, find a Seri recycler near me, and it'll pull up, a list of the recyclers that are certified. Those companies, they go above and beyond. They get inspected not only by the state, but they also get audited by third-party auditing companies. So they have to really have their stuff together and make sure that they're doing something properly. And I'm going to get back on my soapbox for a minute.
Preach.
We do need, as society, we need to remember, the recycling hierarchy is not buy it and dispose of it. There's reuse in all sorts of stuff in between, like human IT does. A lot of the equipment that we get rid of can be reused. It can be reused for a variety of reasons, and we should make sure, don't just take the TV that you're getting rid of and stick it in the garage for two years while it, will get destroyed. Take the time to properly box it up so that if it can be reused, there is that opportunity. We have a responsibility as a consumer to make sure that, stuff can be reused if possible. So it's just, but educate yourself, know what you're doing, know what the company, one of the very basic things I ask consumers to do is if you're taking someplace, one of your electronics to be recycled, ask them flat out, where does this go? And if they hem and they haw and they won't answer the question, I wouldn't leave my stuff there because very likely it may go back and just go in their dumpster. They'll use the stuff that has value. They'll get the value out of it. The rest of it goes in the trash. If they're going to answer you straight up and tell you where it goes and how it's handled, that's a reputable company. And those are the ones you want to deal with.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask a few questions to the panel in general, and I guess we'll start with Oladele. This is kind of going in order. If you could give one piece of advice to consumers or members of the Ann Arbor community with regards to managing electronics waste, what would that be?
It looks like Deli may have fallen off.
Oh, okay, then go ahead.
I was like, I just realized. I think Steve kind of hit it on the head. Like, ask the question. That's what we like to say a lot. Like, ask the question, not only from a consumer standpoint, like asking the question of not only where you're recycling it for your individual technology, but ask your employers, what are they doing with the tech when we're done with it, right? I think about when we think about, there's been a lot of really great movements that have happened because communities got engaged with it. Think about the fact that we don't have straws anymore because of turtles and things, right? Like those are incredibly impactful movements that have happened because communities got engaged with it. E-waste is one that I think we're starting to get engaged with, but need more awareness around, just purely from the fact of, it being that number one stream. So the best advice that I can give, ask the question to your employers, ask the question when you're dropping off your tech, where is this actually going? And like Steve said, leave when you don't get the right answer, right? And don't just choose to give it away. Please don't put it in your trash bins at home. Definitely not. And then also paying attention to legislation, right? And giving and continuing to fight through our votes, right? With what legislation is being passed that are kind of putting these protective measures in there. I think, like we talked about earlier, the right to repair. Of course, Human IT wants to reuse the technology, but we want to also see it come to us less, right? Because we're keeping it longer and that we're using it longer, and being able to repair that is a huge component of it. And empowering us as consumers to actually understand the tech that we're using, where it comes from, and where it goes when we're done. So yeah, my best advice is just continue to ask the question of what is happening with the tech when we're done using it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to Dele. The question, I think I asked it right before you jumped off, but if you could give one piece of advice to consumers and members of the Ann Arbor community with regards to managing the electronic waste, what would that be?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what happened with the glitch, but I think there's been a lot of very good advice and recommendations. If you think about the carbon emissions and sort of the ultimate goal that we all have to save ourselves from a warming planet and to save the next generation, there are small investments. We heard about the distribution of collection services. You may have to drive a little bit longer if you're living in a rural area, but it's a small investment, because I do worry about people driving everywhere too, but I think we've done the calculation that you could save a lot by not replacing your big TV every 2 years just because you want something sharper or better in terms of resolution, or your phone. So that's one thing. For those who can pay for a recycler, most of them will take it for free. A few will charge some money, ask the right questions about what they do. Many will recover the easy, precious materials, but ask what happens to the parts and components that they are not able to recycle or to recover materials. Sometimes they sell it to third parties, and it's okay when they can't actually trace it to the end. But the fact that we're all asking those questions will keep the focus of the manufacturers and the retailers and the recyclers on what really matters to us. I changed my I finally got rid of my iPhone 7 because my family no longer was able to reach me because the battery ran down. I would leave the house and within 30 minutes it will be gone. I was so happy because when I got the new one, it came with a USB-C charger, and I could charge with the same cord, my phone, my computer, everything. It's not worth it to manufacturers to put out so much charging cables and all kinds of things that are not compatible. It's a kind of business model that's not compatible with the circular economy. They fought that. It started in Europe, and we fought it in the United States for some time. But we all have to pay attention to those kinds of things and write our legislators that we support this. We support simplicity. And I think it works. So I was relieved that that happened, but it's a small part of making sure we are not just overwhelmed with so much waste that we give up trying. I think when people realize that there is a solution and that their little part, they play their part, the outcome works, then they'll do more. So I encourage everybody to pay attention to those things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the first step is, do you really need to buy that new shiny thing? The answer is probably no, much to your dismay, I'm sure. But you kind of have to think about higher priority on like what happens to that device when you've discarded it. And I think, maybe consumers should have a little more pride in like maintaining their existing devices, because when you do that, you actually put energy into understanding it, and you can take pride in that. I think, you can brag to your friends and say, hey, I fixed my phone, I replaced the battery. They might be like, can you also make my battery work better? And then you might be able to make a trade deal or something, get something in return. I don't know, use the bartering system. But there's a lot of things that I think consumers don't think. It's a very impulsive act, right? When you buy something, usually it's like, I just want that really bad. And so like, just, I guess kind of my suggestion would be to tone it down a little bit. Just realize that, I know this sounds ridiculous in this age to say this, but just kind of like tone down the desire just a little bit, be more realistic with your needs. Can you really make that phone last a couple years longer? The answer is probably yes, unless it's already like 10 years old or something, in which case you might genuinely want to consider maybe a used model. Go on a site that sells phones that are used. So I think it's a lot of a mental exercise, mostly when buying things, I think would prevent a lot of the issues that we're seeing here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then Steve.
I'm just going to say all of the above. Everybody has had very valid points. The one thing I would love everybody to understand is, yes, at one time you go back to an old, 8086 computer, there was probably a good amount of gold and there's some valuable computer chips in there. But as we love to call it, I call it the Walmart effect. We want everything bigger, cheaper, and there's not so much value in the tech that we have today. So don't expect, if you're turning in your computer, there's a lot of reuse value because they do run, they continue to run, but there's not a lot of value in the actual precious metals in them anymore because they're made to be cheap and they're made to be almost disposable. So please understand, it may cost you a couple dollars if you can afford it to recycle that thing properly, but understand why. It's all part of our responsibility as a consumer to make sure our material goes to the right home. You don't put the garbage out at the end of your driveway and have it go away for free. You shouldn't expect your electronics to go away for free.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I'll close on this before giving everyone a chance to, plug their upcoming work. For me, when we're thinking about sustainability, and everyone shared a lot of great information today, and to me, that's like half of the battle for me, knowing what to do and having the information. And then the other half to me is convincing others, and a lot of the times, honestly, convincing myself that the changes that we need to make are even possible in the first place. All of you do extremely important work in this space. So what gives you hope that our management of electronic waste can improve to be more equitable and sustainable? And is there any good news that you'd like to share? We'll start with Dele and we'll work down the list.
Yeah, one thing that I've always said is we want innovation. We're now entering a big AI revolution, and some of the challenges will be different. But we won't be different as humans with responsibility for our neighbors far and wide. And I'm hopeful that the more we learn about our world, the more responsible we will be. But that requires education. It requires that we change the business model, not to say we won't have more profit for companies that want to emphasize that, but we can have profit in a responsible way. And the circular economy phrase began as a theoretical framework, that what would happen if we lived like the planet Earth lives, where nothing really gets wasted, everything is recycled and rebirthed and reused by every organism that collaborates and sometimes fight about things. But as a society, we can accomplish the same thing, minimizing hazards to organisms and to human health. But we have to recognize that it's not going to be business as usual, and that the most powerful force, in my opinion, in the world is consumer advocacy and consumer education. So if we can all agree on that cities do their part, states do their part, governments and international organizations are on the same page. We're not yet all on the same page about climate change, unfortunately, but this is something that I think we're beginning to move the needle around electronic waste, because we recognize the issues that are at play. And at some point, we will get past this bottleneck where we think the only way forward is to, get new ones and throw them away. So I'm optimistic that the research part, we have a lot of information, right? It's about doing the right thing at this point, but I'm optimistic with education we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dele. Tori, what's the good news?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a ton of hope for where we're going and what we're doing, right? And I think about the business communities and the changes that I've seen within the business communities in the United States over the last few years. We've diverted 15 million pounds of e-waste in the last 12 years. And when we talk about local to Michigan, the city of Detroit has diverted since 2020 64,000 pounds of e-waste. And so what we're seeing now is more organizations with stronger environmental sustainability goals that they're focusing on, that they're incorporating through all their business practices. I think a few years ago, the IT departments of organizations weren't really involved in any sort of sustainability goals. You were starting to see that more and more organizations and getting their IT departments involved. And more organizations realizing that there is a way to do things more environmentally sustainable other than just eliminating like styrofoam cups from their break rooms, right? Like there's tons of things that we can do. And so I have a ton of hope in that things are changing and people are becoming more aware. And I think, Dele hit it right on the nose as well. It's about consumer education and us demanding, like the power of the people, if you will. Like we have so much power to demand change. And I think the starting of the demanding of change is why we're seeing the business practices start to adjust. We're not there yet, but they're starting to adjust. And I think as consumers and individuals, and that if we continue to bang that drum and say, we need the businesses that we work for and give 40 plus hours a week every week to, and demand that they're doing the right things sustainability wise and environmental and socially and giving back to communities, we will continue to see change. So I think there's a lot of hope looking for us in the future. And I'm confident that as we continue to grow awareness about the issues at hand, really across all human rights and environmental things, that we'll start to continue to see the change. Move.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm feeling better already, and I felt good to begin with. Hey, go ahead.
I think one aspect I'd like to touch on is there's, it was kind of alluded to, I suppose, but there's a lot of information out there for free, right? You can go on YouTube, you can learn how to do just about anything if you're willing to risk it a little bit and just try it out. Sometimes it doesn't end well, but you can try and learn more as you go. It's out there for those people who want that information. There's also a lot to be said for the open source, open hardware movement and sort of like creating more opportunities for other players to get involved. You might not be a professional, you don't have to be. You can contribute to these projects, you can understand how they work, you can make them better. You can use them in off-label ways that you would never imagine from the get-go, or the creators never imagined from the get-go, which does provide a lot of opportunities for devices to be used longer than they would normally be able to be. And so I think a lot of consumers are kind of getting savvy to that notion. They're sort of aware of this thing happening where there's devices out there that you can sort of freely modify and use to your own ends. I would say like 3D printing would be a good example of that. It's a very hobbyist grade realm right now, and all of those printers are pretty much designed very similarly. You can easily tweak them and make them do what you want with a little bit of effort and time. So that's very important. I think in general that's going to make, there's also the ability to vote with your dollar, right? So if you're going to buy something from a company that you know is very not permissive of modifying their devices, maybe you don't want to do that. You know, maybe you want to look at some alternatives and buy from company B that offers, you know, the device is easily openable. You can mess around with it, and they're not going to like immediately void your warranty. Full stop. We'd like to void the warranty. Don't get us wrong. It's fun to play around with devices and just kind of open them up and see what's in there. But you know, if the company actually supports that and is helpful and gives you resources and like support in some way, then that makes it even more fun. So I think these are all things that I'm very optimistic about.
Awesome. Steve, go for it.
Just real quickly, most of it's been mentioned, the information that's out there so that we can educate ourselves on how to do things. I've spent the last 3 or 4 years working on grants to small communities in northern Michigan and the UP. Just the desire to have access to recycling and be able to do the right thing is very encouraging. The people out there want to do the right thing, they just don't know how to start. It's overwhelming to a lot of small communities, but once you help them start down that road and they get an idea of how it can, you know, roll from one item to another. Yeah, you may start with water bottles and milk jugs, and then you start an e-waste program, and then you start composting, and it just continues on. So it's nice to see people's interest in caring for the earth.
Awesome. That's great to hear. We're going to open up to audience questions here in just a second, but before we do that, just round robin again right quick. Where can everybody stay following your work, and is there anything that you'd like to promote to our community? We'll start with Dele and again go down the list.
Yeah, I've been at UC Irvine for some time, and it's very easy to find me, just University of California at Irvine. And I also work with the UC System-Wide Global Health Institute. So UCI or UCGHI, I try to update our publications and grants regularly. Full disclosure, I have a current gift/grant from Microsoft. And as I mentioned, I work with Apple. Many of the work we do together is under disclosure protection, but we publish and pay attention to how companies represent themselves. But you can find me easily. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tori. How can people follow you and what's all going on at Human IT?
Yeah, definitely on our website, humanit.org is a great place to look us up. I think recognizing that you all are local in Michigan, my biggest plug would be check out our Digital Equity Center. It's called Human IT on 7 Mile. And so we're located in Detroit. It's a great place to go in and access computers. And always reach out to Human IT for any sort of support or need that you may have in regards to kind of really any sort of digital equity needs. So but yeah, humanit.org is the greatest place to start. So
awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Nate, if you just want to give us where we can stay in touch with All Hands Active.
Yeah, primarily allhandsactive.org is our website, and we have a link to a lot of the things that are going on and the events. Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m. is our Repairs Day Thursday, and that's where we do all the magic fun things with all the taking devices apart and maybe being stumped in the process, and you get to see us struggle a little bit trying to figure things out, but it's all good fun, and hopefully you'll learn something, and maybe you'll actually get to do some of the repairs too, which is the ideal solution.
Awesome, awesome. And then Steve, how would people stay up with all things Eagle?
Well, I just say search for Michigan Eagle. You'll pull up a variety of websites. Unfortunately, the electronics recycling website is more focused towards the regulatory issues rather than supporting the consumers, but we are having some internal discussions about providing more external communication about recycling and how to, more towards the consumer rather than just the regulatory issues. But there's an awful lot of good websites out there about recycling electronics. So, I would just say keep looking around. You're going to find all sorts of. Consumers Technology Association has a real good website about how to recycle electronics and why you should recycle electronics. They are a fairly responsible organization, even though they are run by the manufacturers. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much to all of our panelists. That would be amazing. Thank you so much. And then I'll keep my eyes on the Zoom. Yeah, we're just getting into the audience Q&A. Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, but were people be putting on the Zoom, would they be putting that into the chat? Okay, cool. Then I will go look at that while we're passing the mic around.
Does anyone have any questions?
Okay. Where is the place in Ann Arbor where the recycle that you can go and see where you can get some things and fix them, pick up some recycle?
Well, we don't do any recycling per se. We're trying to get people to be, I think you're referring to All Hands Active, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we do mainly is help you fix your devices before they get to the point where you recycle them. Within reason, we're willing to take it and move it on ourselves if it's like, a smaller item, but we can't accept a lot of things for recycling because that's not really our mission. That being said, if people are willing to work with us, maybe that could be something we offer in the future. However, the goal is, of course, just to fix your stuff, and you get to learn how to do that, whether you want to or not.
If I got something I want to work on,
Yeah.
and I need a little instruction, is there any place I can go, like recycle, like keep that working?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. We offer some instruction. We might not actually know how to fix it, though, so just be aware of that. A lot of the information we get is just because we've done it before. We try our best, but we're kind of like there, to give you a last hurrah. If you're like, this device looks like it's pretty broken, I'll take it somewhere else to see if they can fix it. And if we can't fix it, we might just send it off, kind of.
Okay, yeah, but how much is this, like, you got to pay to let you look at it?
We have our, are you talking about our event page?
I mean, like, would you have to, like, say if I brought something in I wanted to recycle, but I wanted to keep it,
Okay.
and I found something that was recyclable, but I wanted to keep it, and I need some help fixing it.
Yeah, we can help you try and fix it. Yeah, so Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m. At All Hands Active.
Where is it located?
It's right, so it's on East Liberty, it's 255 East Liberty, Suite 225, it's downstairs. It's not too far from the library here.
Okay,
Afternoon Delight, underneath there.
Afternoon Delight.
It's underneath that building.
Okay, all right, that's good to know.
Oh yeah, we don't have a cost. We're a donations accepted sort of model, so
Okay, that's
if you're
good to
feeling
know,
generous. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience here? Anything on Zoom?
Nothing on Zoom, so
I think, but just what you were asking as well about recycling in Ann Arbor. I know there's like a recycle drop-off station. I don't know what sort of e-waste that they accept there. I think that's on Ellsworth. But there's also at Pioneer High School, they usually have a program during the summer for like TVs and computers and things like that. So that's another option for just, if you didn't want to reuse it, you just want to get rid of it.
yeah. And
I don't
that's
know
a-
if there's any others that you
Yeah,
all know.
there are a variety of options, and a lot of it will depend on what specific device you have. But for a lot of the electronic devices that are not televisions, Staples and Best Buy tend to be free options for those, and then Best Buy can do televisions, but they do charge. But yeah, a lot of those sorts of office supply stores, if you actually take a look, a lot of them offer free recycling for a pretty wide variety of devices. So that's generally an option. I remember back when when people ask questions about this, I try to get people to the free options before I tell them about the ones that cost. So yeah, and then additionally, the county, and these are not in Ann Arbor generally, but they'll have them throughout Washtenaw County and other communities will have their cleanup day events, and those are free as well. And to my knowledge, that's the only free event for televisions. But Recycle Ann Arbor does do those. You'll want to check their website. And it is a cost per inch over at Recycle Ann Arbor, as well as Best Buy should be able to do those as well. And they charge a flat fee. So I think it just, before you go to any of those, I think I always try to check the pricing before I take something somewhere and haul a TV into my car.
First of all, thank you to all the panelists for sharing your time with us. It's been really insightful and really appreciate hearing from you all. Nate, something I was curious to follow up with you. I think numerous times this evening we've talked about repair as a way to save individual items from ending up in the landfill. But you've also mentioned a couple different times that you try to involve the person that comes to the repair day in the actual repair process. And I'm wondering kind of how you think involving people in repairing their own items affects them and changes them and makes them think about the world differently or behave differently. So is there a broader impact for having someone come in and fix an item than just that item itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the real secret value of what we're doing. It's not fixing your thing, it's making you aware that you can fix your thing, and being kind of, I say nothing's a black box, or it shouldn't be, if you're willing to crack it open and spend a bit of time understanding how it works, doing a little research, it's a big time investment. I'm not going to be, sugarcoating that at all. This is a lot further than a lot of people might want to go, but I feel like the skill is very translatable to a lot of other things. So, curiosity is sort of a thing that you can use all over, any part of your life, and just understanding how the world works. The unexamined life is not worth living, as they say. So, it's important to do that, I think, in general, but, we're there to sort of get you on the right track. Obviously, like, a lot of people are just very intimidated by the aspect of trying to fix something. They're like, what if I break it? Well, I mean, if it's already broken, you don't have a lot to lose, right? So we're not gonna, we might not be able to fix it, but we're still gonna get that sort of like process going in your head that it's okay to do this. It should be acceptable. It should be like the way that things are always. Of course, we don't see that all the time in reality. Sometimes devices you would think they're not really designed to be repairable at all. Whether or not that's intentional is up to you. If I were a lot more pessimistic, I would say it's definitely like a by design thing. But if you can open it up and look around in there and see how it works or try to understand it, I think that's a super important skill in general. And anybody who wants to get involved, I'm happy to help them. I like to see that light bulb go on.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, seeing no further questions, I think that's all, folks. But thank you all so much for coming out today. Again, major thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. And then we'll have just a few quick updates on our end, which, I run the PowerPoint here?
Yeah, if you want to pull up the screen share.
Yeah.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I just want to appreciate the program, because I think this is exactly what cities need to be doing to educate the community. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we do, just for everyone who's here, we do have an upcoming neighborhood swap day as well. That's a place where people can bring in free items or take free items. So if you had any this is generally like clothing, household goods. If you have a 65-inch TV, I'm not going to say no. This is where people in our community can kind of go and drop off and take items. Our last event, we saved 2,900 items from the landfill. So definitely really excited to come and do that again. That's going to be on Saturday, April 13th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., although you can drop off items beginning at 9. And that's going to be at Angel Elementary over on South University Ave. RSVPing is encouraged, but not at all required. And you can sign up to RSVP or sign up to volunteer at the event at zerowaste.org/A2swap. Again, that is zerowaste.org/A2swap. And thank you. Our next sustainability forum is going to be on April 24th. Definitely subscribe to the Office of Sustainability and Innovations newsletter. And we've got a free tree giveaway coming up on Saturday, April 27th. Again, thank you all so much for attending today. Major thank you to all of our panelists, and let's go manage some electronic waste.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.